All right. Well, according to my clock, it is now 7 o'clock, so let's get started. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I am here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're here for another installment in our EDD in Progress series focusing on article discovery. We have a fairly concise task here today, so I don't think that we will keep you anywhere close to the whole hour. But as always, please feel free to ask questions. We offer these webinars for students such as yourselves. So if there's anything that you would like to see again, that you'd like to have explained, or just let me know, and I'm always happy to do so. All right, if you are new to the ACU Online Writing Center, we provide free support for students such as yourself. We'll work with students in just about every online program at ACU. The one exception is our divinity program. We call this one of the God exceptions. They have their own way that they're doing things. But if you're in any of our online programs besides the School of Divinity, we're more than happy to help you. If you're in the Divinity School and you want to come to our webinars, absolutely. But there are some internal resources that would refer to you for your programs. Now, the ACU Online Writing Center, we will look now and then at what other universities do, and we've noticed that several of our peer universities actually charge for going to the Writing Center. And I was rather horrified to see one Writing Center charging students a rate of $65 for a 45-minute visit. Well, you could have two 1-hour appointments for free with the ACU Online Writing Center. We're not going to charge you. Consider it a tuition perk. We're happy you're here. We're happy to help you along the way. We're not going to charge you money. You can make up to 2 appointments per week with the ACU Online Writing Center. ACU also has a few other services. For example, we have an institutional subscription to tutor.com. So if your way of writing works best with you want to get as much feedback as possible and you want even more than 2 appointments per week, then you can use that subscription with tutor.com to get up to, I believe it's 10 extra appointments per term. It varies a little bit by the program, but I believe doctoral students should be getting 10 appointments per term through that subscription. We will work with you at any stage of your writing, and our staff, we train to become content experts on the programs that we support. I am the head for doctoral writing. I have worked in supporting EDD programs and doctor of nursing practice programs for most of the last decade, and helped, I think my count for EDD students now, I've worked directly with something in excess of 160 EDD students, all of whom we've succeeded in getting out the door and on to the next things in your life. So happy to work with you along the way. If you are working on a paper, whether you're just looking at the assignment instructions or you are getting ready to submit a full draft or anywhere in between, you can come to us for an asynchronous appointment where you schedule a time, you upload your paper, and then generally within 24 hours, we send you feedback. One of those exceptions is coming up the weekend, this weekend actually. You may have noticed that we have a Holy Week happening right now. And so with Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and everything, uh, I will be providing feedback on papers this weekend while my colleagues take a break. They might have a little bit longer than 24 hours, but we try really well to keep things under 24 hours for getting feedback to you. So uh, go ahead, make your appointment, and send us the paper by the time the appointment comes around. You can certainly upload it earlier, but by the time the appointment comes around, and if things happen to be running late, just send an email and I'll just work on someone else's paper first. If you have things that you'd rather ask in person in real time, we can schedule phone or Zoom appointments. If you have, say, a lot of comments from your instructor where you want to show us the things that you're asking about, that might be a good candidate for a Zoom appointment. Uh, and we have lots of other resources on the Writing Center website. We have templates, we have posts, we have examples. I see that there's a question in the chat asking about synthesizing the literature review and clarifying the problem statement. Uh, yes, the question is, any recommendation for marking up articles to get the important information you need to capture, like a matrix or a mind map? Those are both very good ways of clarifying what you are thinking about. I am going to personally suggest that you use the literature review matrix. We have a webinar where I demonstrate that, and I believe an example that you can download on the Writing Center website. Basically, and we'll have some time to go into this after we finish our main content here. Basically, a literature review matrix is a way of keeping notes in an organized fashion about the articles that you're studying. And one of the purposes that you might do is to just mark the ones that looked like they'd be relevant, but it turned out not to be. So then the next time it comes up, you say, oh, no, I looked at that, not relevant. And you don't have to read it again to find out. So more on that on the other side. Please feel free to ask more questions as we go along. I might defer it to after we're done with the main content, but we'll get around to it, and we certainly have the time to do that today. Some webinars coming up that you might be interested in. If you are writing a literature review, you will have to be doing a lot of synthesizing. Students usually have the most trouble and take the most time with chapter 2 because they'll usually go ahead and write their literature review chapter as just a whole bunch of summaries. And then the faculty person reviewing it will send it back saying, I'm not sure how this fits together, or they'll say this is poor flow, or hopefully not this comment, although I've seen it a number of times, this put me to sleep. So if you get any feedback like that, very likely it's not clear how this information that you're summarizing is fitting into an argument. And that's where you add the analysis and synthesis, where you compare bits of information and you apply them to situations. So you pass judgment, you say, okay, well, based on these things, this is what we should do, or this appears to be the best course of action. We also have another webinar in our EdD in Progress series for the best self-portrait assignment that's coming up on Tuesday the 13th in 2 weeks. And if you're wondering what is in the EdD in Progress series so far, I decided to put together a little map of these. You can find all these on the webinar archive, and you can search for your course number. But if you're enrolled in one of these courses and you haven't done this assignment yet, we have a dedicated webinar where we explore that, just as we're going to do today with the article summary. With no further ado, let us dive into our main content today. So we have 3 learning objectives. First, we want to understand the Traits and Skills Leadership Journal Article Discovery assignment. This is an assignment in Leadership 711. The same basic principles will apply for any other assignment where you're required to track down an article. And then we'll look hands-on at the article discovery and search process. And then I will model, using input from you, the process of writing up an article summary. I will be asking for recommendations on what to search for. So this is an example, this is an opportunity to tell us something about the things that interest you, because I have to do some searches. It might as well be about something that you find interesting and exciting. All right, so let's delve into that first one. I have extracted the assignment guidelines here, and I've reformatted them just to make them a little bit easier to read on the slide. So this assignment, we have first a framing statement. The purpose of this assignment is to give students practice locating scholarly journals articles on a topic within their preferred context and thoughtfully complete summaries of 180 to 250 words. And it goes on to say there's a limit of 250 words. So how much is that? Well, one double-spaced 12-point font Times New Roman and paper. Basically, if you use our course paper template or follow the standard APA instructions, that's going to be right around 1 page. So you have an instruction saying, yeah, write at least a little bit more than a half page about the article, but no more than 1 page. All right, that's something people can visualize pretty well. All right, so what else do we need to do? Okay, find, download, and read one academic journal article for the leader-member exchange theory of leadership. The article should be related to your context of interest and should be an empirical study or literature review from a peer-reviewed scholarly journal written within the last 5 years, approximately. And then the specific instruction to make sure it's a journal article, do not include book chapters, book reviews, dissertations, books, editorials, white papers, trade magazine articles, and other non-peer-reviewed sources. In short, this assignment is intended to make sure you know how to use the ACU library, that you understand how to prepare a targeted critical summary of a journal article, because you will be using these as your notes for a lot of the literature review writing, and that you understand what makes something a reputable source, looking for peer-reviewed scholarly journal articles. Now, it says written within the last 5 years. I'll say a little bit more about this later, but that is a suggestion. Why 5 years? 5 years, most people agree, is a reasonable threshold for recent research. Is a reasonable threshold for recent research. Now, where this comes up is that your EdD dissertation, you'll be required to mostly cite current research. And if you use 5 years now as your cutoff, well, it's going to take you a little while to get through the coursework and write the dissertation, then defend. If you used 5 years as a cutoff now, you'd have a number of sources that were then 7 or so years old. So if you use, say, 3 years as your cutoff for this assignment, you're more likely to be able to use that material going forward. All right, and then it says, give us the precise summary of the article in one paragraph with the APA citation. All right, and then the reason you selected this article, the problem or issue, the methods used to study that, and the most important or significant finding of the study. Okay. And then the rubric basically says, hey, do all the things that were just mentioned. All right, that's pretty straightforward. So let's move on into the article discovery or search process. And this is that point that I mentioned where I'm going to ask you, please let me know by typing in the chat window, what is a problem or issue related to what you are studying or what you want to do that interests you? And okay, I see one already. Now, a little trivia about myself. I'm actually a seminary graduate. I went to the Boston University School of Theology for my master's. This is the school that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. attended. Howard Thurman taught there for many years. They call it the School of Prophets. So this is a topic that is well and close to my heart. I am glad that this was volunteered. So for the article discovery, the search process, we are going to go to the ACU library. And I encourage you to follow along and do this on your own computer. We're going to go to the ACU library. We're going to type in our search, and we're just going to start and dive in. Then we're also going to implement these requirements, where the assignment says, this is what you have to have. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to give some additional suggestions, because if this is related to the thing you think you want to write about for your dissertation, might as well make it something that you can use when you are publishing this, and that we make that content specific to the kinds of context, whether that's a geographic or temporal or perhaps denominational. So let us now switch gears. I am going to share my web browser, and we are going to go to the ACU library website. And again, I encourage you to follow along on your own computer. All right, so you should now be seeing my web browser. Please let me know if this is not the case. You should be seeing my web browser. You should see the nice, recently redesigned and updated ACU website. And we have this search window here. So we have, as the requested topic, clergy leader, well-being, and flourishing. So one of those things that might come up is, well, what are the different ways that you might phrase clergy? But let's just start with that. We'll start with clergy leader, well-being, flourishing. We don't need to include a word like and here. We'll just throw these terms in here, and let's see what we get. Now, this is always the question, how much are we opening the floodgate? And in this case, this search with no restrictions added yet has produced more than 25,000 results. Clearly, that is more than any one of us want to read right now. So let's go ahead and put on those limitations that the assignment is requiring. And if you see down here in the lower left-hand corner, we have a checkbox for scholarly peer-reviewed journals. Great, we'll check that. And it will update the results, and we'll end up with some smaller number. In this case, we have about 3,400 results. All right, so that's still a lot, but that's a lot less than we had earlier. I'm going to also suggest full text, because while there are journals out there that ACU doesn't have, and you could submit an interlibrary loan request, we only have a week to do this assignment, so let's go with what we have, especially because right now there are 3,385 options here. So I think we'll find something that fits this assignment here. So we'll search for full text. All right, that shrunk that a little bit. And let's also put in the date restriction. So, all right, it's 2021 now, so 2020, 2019, 2018. I'm going to make my date restriction. I only want to look at things published as late as 2018. This should cut the numbers down a bit. And so we have 265. Awesome. So there's a lot of stuff there. We can try being more particular. Now, this is something where your own personal interests will probably guide what you put in next. Because if you were, say, looking at, say, Episcopalian clergy versus, say, Presbyterian Church USA, these are things where how the denomination is organized and how things like, do you have the same benefit package at a given church job at every church, or does it vary on the congregation? Well, this could be a big issue. So if we're talking about well-being and flourishing and having, certain retirement benefits or healthcare and mental health care and things like that, that could be an area where you want to become more specific to the denomination. Let's say that for the sake of this search that I decide I want to see if I can go with, let's say, Baptist. See what that does to our search. Well, that drops us down to 29. Now, that's not necessarily focused on Baptist, but it has to mention that term. So let's see. We have a variety of things here, some that are historical and about colonialism. That's not what we're looking for right now. Stuff in Colombia, well, that may or may not be relevant. So I'm going to open this back up here, and I'm going to add in United States, because it's not that we can't look at things in other countries, but we'll probably have an easier comparison, more connections to our topic if we are doing something related to the geographic context that we're doing in. And I would guess that most of you are doing research in or near this country. All right, so let's see. WellBeing Flourishing. I think this article sounds like a pretty good candidate. It's published in Psychology of Religion and Spirituality. It's a study about clergy spiritual well-being, depressive symptoms, and occupational distress. Those all sound like things related to flourishing. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click into this. Now, since I selected full text, I know I can read it now. And we have a few things that we can grab here. All right, so I am going to queue up a copy of the APA course paper template, which if you don't have a copy, you can download this from the Online Writing Center website, or just send me a message and I'll send it to you via email. So we have some stuff here, and I could write down all of this stuff to get that quote-unquote citation information mentioned in the assignment. I could copy it all myself, but we have this handy-dandy cite button. Now, it's not perfect. The information that's entered, sometimes you have to do a little bit of formatting, but it saves a lot of time. And looking at this one, it actually looks like everything is correctly done. We have all the right capitalization. We even have an en dash in the page range. We have the right formatting for your DOI for APO 7th edition. Great, this is going to save me a lot of time. So let's say that this is the one that I decide to do my search on. All right, well, I've selected this. I'm going to copy that. And now I'm going to go to my Word document. So give me just a moment as I change my sharing around. Okay, I've got my paper here. And what is this assignment titled? Well, this assignment is the article discovery. So in a brilliant bit of planning, hold on, let me fix something with the screen sharing. There we go. Do let me know if you can't see the window now. So as I was saying, APA style does not actually require that you give very original titles. You could just call this article discovery, and that would be fine. It doesn't have to be poetic, doesn't have to be unique. It just has to be informative. All right, now let's review some things that the instructions and stated to do. One of those instructions was that we should start out with the citation information. And I have seen some students who see, oh, they must mean a parenthetical author date citation. Well, in this case, citation is being used as a way of referring to the reference information that would go in your references section. All right, so you'll see I pasted this, and there are a couple things that aren't quite where we want them to be. There's this gray highlighting. There is the font isn't Times New Roman. So I'm just going to go ahead and select keep text only, or you could use match destination formatting. Let's try that one. So here's the difference between match destination formatting and keep text only. If I used keep text only, that would get rid of all the italics. What match destination formatting does is it says, okay, well, I know you're pasting it into an area where here's how the text looks. I'll try and match that as much as possible. And that's what it did here, and that's going to save me some work. The next thing I'm going to do, because I'm using the APA course paper template, if I pop up in the styles pane here, I'm on the home button in the ribbon and clicked on styles pane to get this menu here. I have access to these pre-built styles. So to get the hanging indent that we need for this, I just click anywhere in here and click on APA reference. You see I now have a hanging indent. Great, this is now formatted correctly and I'm ready to go. All right, so what's next on my list for what I need to include here? Well, if we look back at the assignment instructions, we have, oh, sorry. I see there's a question about copy and pasting. Yes, let's deal with that before we go forward. So when you paste from another source in Word, like the web page I used earlier, if there is something where there is formatting that doesn't exactly match where you're formatting, Word will automatically give you this little pop-up button here. It looks like a little clipboard. You can see this down here. And so this little pop-up button gives us the paste options. And so if I click on the triangle that pops up there, I get this menu where it has three options. Keep source formatting, which is make it look just the way it looked in this place I copied it from. Match destination formatting, which is, all right, well, try and make it work with the place I'm pasting it. And keep text only, which says, throw all the formatting out of the window, just include the text itself. So if you paste, before you click on something else, Word will pop up this little pasting menu where you can change how it was pasted to keep the destination formatting, but adapt it to the template here, which is what we chose. Because when I pick this, again, you see, oh, it's now moved it all to Times New Roman, 12 point, no highlighting, and stuff like that. Excellent question. And if there's ever anything that you see me doing and you're wondering, how do I do that, or how do I do that so fast, ask away. We all learn best by watching and by asking questions, because it helps us remember. All right, so according to the instructions, we're supposed to find and the article. Did that. Going to download that. All right. Let's head back to the web browser here. All right, so we've got the article. Time to download it. Now, HTML full text, I could just look at it on there. But if I really want to download it, I want to click that PDF full text link. And that'll show me with all the page formatting and stuff. And I can just save this to my computer. Great. Oh, hey, I actually know some of these people. Cool. All right, so we have the abstract here, which is a brief summary. If we were on the fence about whether we wanted to do this article, well, in particular, we would read the abstract first to get a quick overview of what's involved. Now, it happens this is a longitudinal study of 895 United Methodist clergy persons. So actually, probably a fair number of my classmates are in this study. And that's a lot. The requirement was that it be a literature review or an empirical study where you're going out and you're collecting data in a scientific fashion. Well, working with 895 clergy over a longitudinal, that's very rigorous. So yes, this looks like it's going to meet the requirement for an empirical study. All right, what else do we need here? Well, according to the instructions for the assignment, needs to be related to context of interest. All right, I'm going to define my context of interest here being U.S. clergy in mainline Protestant denominations. Should be an empirical study or lit review. Yep, got the empirical study part. Last 5 years, got that already. And we'll just do a quick check and make sure that it is not a book chapter. And we see, oh, yeah, it was published in this journal. So we double checked that. Good. Everything is looking great so far. So let us now return to what we are being asked to do here. We are being asked to write a precise summary for the article, one paragraph. We got that APA citation, so we're just really going to the paragraph. But you might ask about that question, after the citation, provide a direct link to the journal article. Now, this is something where there are two ways that this can go. One is to say, oh, the DOI is a direct link to the article, I'm good. The DOI being that the link that's the end of our current citation. The other is to say, well, hold on. I think the professor is asking for a permalink. A permalink is similar to a DOI, but in this case, it will get you to this article through ACU's system. The DOI, you might have to do a few things to figure out how to log in and get the article. But the permalink should get you here. You just have to log into your ACU account. Now the permalink, you can see this chain, and clicking on that will get me at the top of the screen. If we went back to our previous screen here, where we were just searching, you can also look at it here. Okay, we click to the article. We're not in the full text view. We have that same chain button here, and this time it's labeled permalink. Now, one of the reasons that I'm mentioning this is that a number of related assignments that you will do later in the EDD program will explicitly ask you to have a permalink in addition to the DOI. So that's why we're going to go grab it here. I just click on permalink, and that pops up here. I select it, I copy it, and we head back to the Word document, and we'll paste it in there. A permalink will not work with an ILL article. So if you were doing an ILL thing, I would say don't do that for one of the article discovery or annotated bibliography things, because how the interlibrary loan requests work is that you fill out a form saying, hi, I would like this article. And then our ILL staff put out a notice saying, hey, is someone willing to give us a copy of this? And then you'll get a PDF. And so, although the PDF will work great for you reading it, other people trying to access it, they just won't have a link that will get you that. Now, that said, you can give someone a permalink to something that we don't have a full text for. You won't see any of those articles right now because in our search we selected full text only. But if you have found something that you really wanted and you were doing this with enough advance notice to get it through ILL, you could include a permalink, and that would lead you to the place in the ACU library search where it said, all right, here's the article. We've gone as far as we can, but here's everything there is about the article. We just can't show you the full text. So you can give a permalink for an article that you separately request via ILL, but that will just take you to the place in one search where it says, well, here's everything about it that we can show you. So hope that's helpful there. Let us return to the Word document here. All right, so I've gone ahead and pasted the permalink. And I've even gone ahead, because this is the limit of what the APA citation or reference has. Permalink exists outside, so I've just put it in the label permalink and then the link. All right, so I've done those two parts. What's next on my list? All right, we need a paragraph that's going to be 180 to 250 words, where we list the reason we selected this particular article, the problem or issue being investigated, the methods used, and the most important or significant finding of the study. All right. Now, you don't have time for me to sit back and read this whole article and then summarize this. So for the sake of our demonstration here, I'm going to make up things, but the kinds of things that you would find in the article here. So if you are planning on reading this article yourself, don't pay attention to the exact content of what I show you here. All right. So we have our summary here that we're going to be giving. And for this assignment, we really don't have any internal headings because we just have the citation, the permalink, and the paragraph itself. Now, other assignments will later ask you to label these areas, and that's generally because it's growing and you're having more things. Like when you get to the annotated bibliography, you'll be giving the citation and a summary and analysis and a few other things of multiple articles. Right now it's just one, so we don't need all these different subject headings to divide things. We're just going to start our discussion. I selected this article because I was considering Now, those of you who have any experience with close friends who are clergy persons, you'll know that you generally don't become a clergy person to get away from stress-related work problems, usually quite the opposite. Now, one of the reasons I typed this out, I wanted to show you how the styles are working here. So because I applied that APA reference section, and normally when you're working on your references, you just put more references at the end. So of course those should be formatted like an APA reference. But we're writing a paragraph now here, so we want this to look like any other paragraph in the body of the paper. So if you see this happening, just make sure you're clicked somewhere into that text, and in the styles menu, look for body text. Body text is the style that says, make this look like just a regular paragraph, where the first line is indented half an inch and the rest is just aligned with the left margin. So if I click on body text, watch what happens to that paragraph. Great. Now it turns out I added a tab myself, so that's still there. So I just take that out and now it looks correct. And any paragraph I add after this will also be correct, aptly formatted. All right. I selected this article because it was considered converting to the United Methodist Church and wanted to make sure I was not going to encounter any stress-related work problems. So I could just answer that prompt in one sentence. But if we're going to fill 180 to 250 words, you're probably going to want to do about 2 sentences per prompt, and then you'll end up around the right thing. If you're curious, this one sentence here that I've written out, well, if I use tools word count to check here, that sentence is itself about 30 words. So to get around 250, I'm going to need somewhere around 8 sentences of that length. So again, around 2 sentences for each one of the 4 prompts. All right, I selected this article for this reason. I also selected it because there is limited research of this scope and scale conducted on a longitudinal time frame. I actually got the opportunity while I was at Boston University to work with one of the centers there that does this kind of longitudinal study where you look at clergy persons for a period of, I think that they're now on the 3rd cycle, so some of the clergy have been enrolled for 15 years. And you learn a lot. A lot can change in your first couple of years of pastoring, and then when you're on your 2nd or 3rd church. So lots of interesting stuff. And if there's something like that which drew you to this particular one, well, this is your opportunity to tell the reader that. Hopefully the reason is not, oh, my great aunt Judy wrote this article. That might be a reason why you want to read it, but probably not one to choose it for this assignment. Okay. So the next prompt here, let's take a look back at the slides for a moment. We've done the first bullet with 2 sentences. All right, we need to describe the problem or issue investigated in the article. All right, now this is separate from my problem or issue. For the purpose of writing this paper, my issue is I'm not sure whether I want to go UMC or not. Well, we're interested in the one that the article was investigating. So, all right, back to our paper here. All right, the problem investigated, the problem that was investigated in the article was the, and again, I'm just going to make things up here because I haven't read this article, and we want to focus on how you go about writing this rather than the specifics of the content. All right, we'll say the problem that was investigated in the article was the skyrocketing increase in health costs for the United Methodist Church. And then, well, we have the opportunity to go into detail. It specifically investigated this as a national rather than regional problem. And now, you might be looking at the text that I wrote and say, skyrocketing increase. That doesn't sound very formal. And if you said that, you'd be right. Often when we're just getting the thoughts out, they come in our normal vernacular, how we regularly speak or write. But if you're growing and reviewing this, you say, oh, okay, skyrocketing. Well, how can I say that more specifically, more literally, more formally? Well, we could just say was the significant increase. And significant is enough to care about, uh, or rapid increase, or any number of things there. All right, the problem that was investigated in the article was a significant increase in health costs for the United Methodist Church. It specifically investigated this as a national rather than a regional problem, and I see reading here, I should include a verb, and focused on the implications of these costs for individual clergy stress. And I might look at this and say, well, okay, I'm actually thinking that maybe I didn't capture that right. How can I clarify this? And then go back and say, okay, and examined the correlations between these costs and individual clergy stress. All right, so we've gone through the first two bullets here for what our paragraph should say. We've got 4 sentences down. We need about 4 more. What's next on our list? Okay, the methods the researcher used to study the problem or issue. Now, for this one, we're actually going to go back to the actual article in question, because this is something where I have a lot of questions that people ask me about how to find this or how to recognize it. And like all things, the more you do it, the easier it gets, the faster it becomes. But there are certain keywords that you can look for. One is to look for the keyword method or methodology. In this case, we see a couple things about it, that this was a longitudinal study. So that's telling us about the period of time, and any other details are probably going to be close to that. If you have to leave, don't worry. If you're on the RSVP list, we'll send you a copy of the full recording later. If you didn't RSVP for this one, just give me your email address and we'll add you to that list for this webinar. All right, so I'm going to do a quick search here, and I'm going to search for longitudinal. Now, something that comes up is that sometimes you have an embedded PDF reader, so if I just search in my web browser, it doesn't come up. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I'll jump to the full text version here, because that will search a little bit more easily here. All right, so I just search and we get okay. Let's see. All right, so yep, they're saying it's a longitudinal study. Great. So in response to the prompt here, the prompt, I'll remind you, was asking, what's the method the researcher used to study the problem or issue? So the longitudinal is part of that. There's also the question of if this was qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods. So these are the broadest types of methodology. Are you looking at things that reduce easily to counting? That would be quantitative. Are you looking at things that are more intangible and that don't really convert to numbers? That would be qualitative. Or is it a mix of those, which would be mixed methods here? Now, usually the larger studies are going to be quantitative in nature because it's difficult to interview a few thousand people. And in this case, they were looking at a fair number of clergy persons. They had 895 survey participants. Great. So this, we can see, all right, it was a longitudinal study. They were being administered a survey. The survey was probably quantitative, but they haven't told us yet. let's go ahead and search if quantitative or qualit comes up. No. Well, we'll see what they tell us about the survey. And you'll see that, okay, they're using the spiritual well-being scale, and that the answers are being scored 0 to 4. All right. So even though they didn't tell us in those terms, we can look at this and say, aha, this is a quantitative longitudinal study. All right, so we're going to go back here, and the researchers used a quantitative longitudinal study design. All right, now I said you want to have an average of 2 sentences per prompt. If there's one that you're going to only have 1 sentence about, it's probably going to be this one, in part because where you are in your program, we're not expecting you to have a ton to say about these specific methodologies. You're at the point where you're assimilating and understanding research. Later on, when you write your dissertation, you'll go into more detail here. So this is the point where you probably just have 1 sentence here, and then you'd expand either the problem part or the reason you selected this, or that discussion of the most important or significant finding of the study. Now, again, I haven't read this article, so I'm going to make up my own finding for this. The authors found that, whether you say the authors or the researchers, be consistent. So either of these is fine, but using both researchers and authors, that can get confusing. When you're reviewing that, just change this one to researchers too, and we know you're referring to the same people. The researchers found that clergy with the lowest medical bills had the lowest level of stress. Which correlated directly with the all right, so I've given my 1-sentence version. The researchers found that clergy with the lowest medical bills had the lowest level of stress, which also correlated directly with having a lower copay for medical insurance. Now you might say, well, you've just reported the most important finding. What else is there to do? Well, what you can also do is to expand this by saying why that is the most important, or the most important to you and what you are doing. How will this be applied? What makes this so important? And just to check how much space we have, how many words, I'm going to do a word count here. So for these sentences we have so far, it's 129 words. So we need to expand it. We need to get into that 180 to 250 ballpark. So that probably is going to mean adding another 2 sentences. All right, and which makes sense because this one is a little bit short, and we only spent 1 sentence on that prompt anyway. All right. So one of the things you can do is explain how this is significant, like talking about the depth of the data. And again, not reading the actual article here, I'm making something up for this. This statistical association was so strong that, and no confounding variables were identified, leading the researchers to conclude that the low copay and low medical bills caused the participants to have the lowest level of stress. So it's still talking about this thing, but now it's explaining, oh, so That was their finding, and it was a really strong finding. And that explaining how or why something is stronger is where you can easily add a lot of words explaining that. We're now up to 163. We just need another sentence or so, and we'll be in the right ballpark here for this. Now, what could you add here? Well, you could also add something about how this relates to you. In my hypothetical case where I'm considering converting to the United Methodist Church, well, if I say, well, this suggests that someone converting to UMC as a clergy person should seek out a church with excellent health benefits or negotiate for excellent health benefits so that they have a low level of stress. Well, whatever you choose to add. This is expanding on how or why this is the most important or significant finding. Something that comes up in later assignments is where you're not stating what the authors say the most important or significant finding was, where you're selecting the most significant or important thing to what you are doing. And this comes up a lot in the annotated bibliography assignments, where you're not supposed to summarize everything. What you're supposed to do is summarize the most relevant things to whatever it is you're trying to do, like decide whether or not you want to convert to the United Methodist Church in my example, or addressing a bullying problem, or finding out how to improve teacher retention, or whatever your particular cause and context are. So I did promise that we would get back to an earlier question about literature review matrices. So I am going to go and grab a resource really quick. In the meantime, if you have any questions that you would like to ask that have not been asked before, this is a great time to type those in, and then I will make sure to get to them before we finish here. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that I strongly recommended using a literature review matrix to track the different articles that you're working on. And as it turns out, we have a webinar, this one here, Search Methodology and ROL Matrices, where I go into some detail about how to create your own literature review matrix. I believe we have one available to download as well from our resources section. And if you can't find it, just send me an email and I'll send you a copy there. So the point of the literature review matrix is to have an easily sortable thing. So if you are writing your annotated bibliography, for example, you're going to be categorizing things as, oh, I've got 2 that use this methodology, 2 that use that thing, and so on and so forth. And when it comes time to writing your lit review, you look at that and say, oh, all right, I've got some examples of different methodologies that were used, and looking at the conclusions, here's what they were able to find using this approach. And that just makes it a lot easier to make some decisions. Let me just look at the original question to make sure I got everything there. So a mind map. A mind map is usually more helpful for finding the connections between something when you're trying to discern a pattern for yourself, and less so than when you are organizing the lit review. Some people use it as kind of a brainstorming thing where they'll write in general topics or themes, and then they'll write in the author date citations for different articles under that. And that's just a way that for them is more intuitive than doing this with the matrix. But if you're looking specifically at how to structure the lit review, I would start with that matrix and watch that video there. There's another question there about annotated bibliographies. So we have a number of different webinars on annotated bibliographies. So the link that I shared earlier is for the Online Writing Center website. under Services, Writing Webinars. So this is where we place both the list of upcoming webinars and their recordings, and also where we have our archive here. And here, because this is something we touch on in a number of different places, you can certainly do a word search, but you'll find right at the top of the available webinar recordings, there is a webinar about annotated bibliographies. So I would strongly recommend watching that. I believe in this case that we're looking at the annotated bibliography assignment for Leadership 701. I believe I recall correctly, that's the one we spend the most time on in that recording. We have some additional ones as well, as you can see when I do a word search for annotated bibliographies. The one that we did just last week, that recording is available online. And let's see. We have another recording here. Now, if you are, if there's a specific type of annotated bibliography that you have questions or something that you'd like to see that's not on the list here, both when you RSVP for a webinar, and this is more a forward-looking thing, but if you RSVP for a webinar, the form has an area where you can request something, and also you can also just write in with an email saying, hey, I'm looking for something specific, like there's a specific assignment, I've watched the regular one, do you have something for that? And we'll see what we can do. In some cases, I'll just record a quick how-to because it's a concise question. And in some cases, we'll have something there and that we can help you find or add a more clear label for that. As we go through and add more webinars, I am labeling them so that you can see the exact course and assignment that we discuss in detail. But without looking at that specific one, I wouldn't be able to tell you right now what particular features are unique to that and not counted in another one. If you have a little moment to just give me some more detail on what you're looking for, happy to go into that. But let me bid everyone who was here for the main webinar to say a thank you for coming. I hope this was helpful. This concludes our webinar, and I will go ahead and send a copy of the recording to everyone who RSVP'd or wrote me a message during this webinar asking for a copy. So I got your names there. And moving to the question about the annotated bibliography assignment in 711. So I'm just going to bring up that class here. And believe me, when I was in seminary at Boston University, which is one of the home to one of the preeminent Methodist seminaries in the country, my classmates gave me a strong sell. They're like, well, you can do pretty much everything you want. You love music. We'll have the hymn sandwich. And you can also get married and still be a clergy person. All right, so let's look at Leadership 711. And, oh, okay. As a staff person, I can see a few more menu options than the students can, but it all adds up to the same in the end. So let's see. You are looking forward to the Styles of Leadership Annotated Bibliography assignment. Is that correct? This one that's due on April 12th? You know, I believe that I did a webinar where we used this as an example. I'll check my notes, and if I find that, I can certainly send that to you. But the main part of this one here is that you are obtaining these specific sets. You know, it's telling you you must have this exact number on this topic. And then where people have the most trouble, it's not with the structuring or the formatting, it's with the following these exact prompts, because it's very easy to talk about something that's related, but not exactly what was being asked for. And for example, on the analysis side, the difference between limitations and delimitations is a common point of confusion. For example, in the, and I'm going to share my screen here to show this. So in research terminology, a delimitation refers to the boundaries on the research. So for example, if I was going to do a study like the one that we were talking about earlier, and making a study of clergy in Boston, that is deciding to put a delimitation on. We're drawing a boundary and say, we're only going to talk to people in Boston. Now, something that you might get from that as a limitation. Limitations are things that limit the application of these results, the generalizability of the results from the group that we studied to the larger population. So, for example, you might find a large proportion of clergy in Boston who don't own cars and who walk. Now, if we went to, say, Georgia, to Atlanta, you probably would not find many clergy who did not own cars because A, Georgia, air conditioning, and B, MARTA, the public transit system there, while wonderful, does not go nearly the breadth and depth of places that the MBTA, that the T trains do in Boston. So that would be an example of the delimitation to only study people in Boston, creating a limitation of, well, we don't know how representative that car ownership data is for the nationwide clergy as a whole, because this is just very narrow sample in terms of geography. So that's one place where people often have trouble. The other one, again, is where you talk about something similar, but not exactly what you were being asked to state. And I see the question, so a delimitation could be that research only studied teachers in one country and not others? Absolutely. As an example of a geographic delimitation, so bilingualism. When I was living in California, it was very, very common for teachers to be bilingual, or at least have some functional fluency in Spanish, because chances are, if you're in teaching in a school in California, you're going to have some students of Hispanic descent and some that have spoken Spanish as growing up at home. So it's a very useful thing. It happens that students who go to those programs are strongly encouraged to study the language, and then they get practice because, again, in California. And then if so we did a study that was delimited to teachers in California, and then we went to, say, Minnesota, you'd find that a lot of them do not speak Spanish. A lot of them just are not bilingual. These results are not very generalizable, which becomes a limitation. But the limitation is the result of the delimitation. So I hope that's helpful. Any last questions before we break for the evening? The last point that I'll say here is that was this source helpful to you? How does it help your argument? If you explain why it is important to you or helpful to you, that will usually help frame the rest of the discussion. If you begin with, this source was helpful to me, that doesn't really go very far. But if you say, this source was helpful to me because it changed this, or it showed me about this, or because it provides a model for doing X, Y, Z, which could include provides a potential model for the research that you plan on conducting for your dissertation, great. That is the kind of thing that invites additional detail. Now, so there's a phrasing question there. So about using first person. So usually a first person is allowed for the application section because this is where you're talking about how it is helpful to you. If it happens that the instructor for the course this time around has requested as a house rule that you not use I statements, that you not use first person for this section, and then here's how you might word this. And I'm going to type this in the chat window so that you can see the text. Actually, wait, no. I have a Word document. I will share that, and I will type the text there so you can see it. All right, we're switching to the Word document here. And let's compare two bits of text here. This article is very useful to me because versus this article provides a rigorous model, a rigorously tested model for blah. So let's say that your topic was you were looking at teacher retention at international schools. All right, so in the first version, you might have written up that in first person as this article is very useful to me because it explored teacher retention at international schools, which is the context in which I work. I'm trying to decrease turnover. Let's say that was your first person version, your direct thought there. And if you were rewriting that in third person, you're going to still say many of the same things, but how you approach those explanations. Okay, so this article provides a rigorously tested model for examining the topic of interest. Now, the information that your reader is getting is basically the same. It's being presented in a different format, and there are many journals that prefer the second one because it takes the I out and you can focus on the ideas. The advantage of the first one, if your teacher allows you to use first person for that, is that it clarifies, oh, you're talking about its utility to you rather than just random person who happens to be working on teacher turnover. And so in later things, this would become more detailed as your project becomes more specific, more narrow. But I hope you agree that this is giving the same kinds of information, but without including the personal element. And by saying examining the topic of interest, that's usually where you would state in the introduction to your annotated bibliography that, oh, this annotated bibliography examines research on X or research related to this problem that was being explored. Depending on which annotated bibliography assignment it is, some of them have no synthesis or conclusion at the end. Some of them do require that. Let me just look back at this really quick. So this particular assignment does not require a synthesis section at the end. So the place where you connect it to your larger topic is going to be in that application section at the end. So that's probably a good pausing point, but if you have additional questions, please feel free to send me an email or send it to the General Writing Center email address. My email address is available in the directory, and I just typed it into the chat window, and I think you've been in my inbox before, so you know how to reach me. But yes, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. Have a great evening, everyone.